There is a boat in a storm on the Sea of Galilee, and every man on it is fighting for his life. Except one. He is asleep. The wind came down off the hills without warning, the way it still does on that lake. Waves are breaking over the sides. Water is filling the hull faster than anyone can bail it. These are fishermen, men who grew up on this water, and they believe they are about to drown in it. And in the stern of the boat, on a cushion, one man sleeps through all of it. When they finally shake him awake, listen to the first thing out of their mouths. It is a question, and it is an accusation. Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? If you have ever felt guilty for resting while important things were still undone, you already know that question. You just usually aim it at yourself. Scripture holds 4 truths about rest. 4, and none of them is try harder to relax. They answer a much harder question. Can you stop while the work is unfinished and still be faithful? This video walks through all 4, one at a time, and each one arrives inside a story. A garden, a desert, an exhausted prophet who wanted to die, and that boat. By the time we climb back aboard it, the question, do you not care, will sound completely different. But this story does not start in a storm. It starts tonight, in a quiet house, at 10:47. The laptop closes at 10:47 at night. You know the sound it makes, that soft click, and then the little fan inside spins down, and the kitchen goes quiet. One light is still on over the stove. The rest of the house has been asleep for an hour. The dishwasher finished its cycle a while ago, and nobody heard it. The person standing in that kitchen has done the work. Understand that clearly, because everything in this story depends on it. The report went out on time. The kids got picked up, fed, prayed with, tucked in. The emails that had to be answered today were answered today. Nobody on earth is waiting on this person tonight. No boss, no client, no deadline. The day is, by any honest measure, complete. So they sit down on the couch, and for about 4 minutes, they just sit there. Then the hand moves. You know this motion too. The phone is off the armrest and lit up before there is even a decision to pick it up. And the thumb is already pulling down on the inbox to refresh it. Nothing new. Of course, nothing new. It is almost 11 at night. But the checking was never really about the email. Because, while the body sat still on that couch, a list started reading itself in the dark. The 2 messages that could technically wait until morning, but would look better, answered tonight. The faucet in the hall bathroom that has been dripping since March. The retirement account that needs looking at. The call to mom that got pushed from Tuesday to Thursday to sometime this weekend. The volunteer form from church. Still blank on the counter. Item after item. Patient and quiet. Each one tapping its foot. Here is the strange part. This person is tired. Truly tired. The kind that lives behind the eyes. They want to rest. They have earned it by any standard they would apply to a friend. If someone they loved described this exact evening, they would say, "You should be off your feet. You have done enough." They cannot say it to themselves. The moment they stop, a small courtroom opens up somewhere in the chest, and a prosecutor stands up and starts reading from the list. And the unsettling thing about that voice is how righteous it sounds. It does not sound like ambition. It sounds like conscience. Some nights it even sounds like faith. Somewhere along the way, A lot of believers absorbed a rule that no one ever said out loud. You may rest when everything important is finished. It sounds responsible. It sounds almost biblical. And it has one fatal flaw. In an adult life, everything important is never finished. The inbox refills. The house ages. The people you love keep needing you. Because that is what love costs. If rest has to wait for a finished world, rest is never coming. So the tired person sits on the couch with a lit phone. Guilty in both directions. Guilty, resting, because of everything undone. Guilty, working, because they know this pace is quietly eating them. That rule did not come from nowhere. Before we can take it apart, we need to look at it in daylight. Because in daylight, it does not look like a rule at all. In daylight, it looks like a virtue. Every church in America has a woman like this. Ask anyone in the building about her, and they will smile and say the same sentence. She never stops. She runs the meal train when somebody has surgery. She teaches the 4th grade class and covers the 2nd grade class when the regular teacher travels. She stays late stacking chairs. If you asked her to name the last Sunday she simply sat in a service, received, and drove home, she would have to think about it. And the thinking would take a while. And the whole congregation loves her for it. That sentence, "She never stops," is spoken with warmth every single time. Nobody says it as a warning. There is a man like this too. He answers work emails at the dinner table, and his family has learned to talk around the phone. In his mind, this is sacrifice. He is providing, he is being responsible. He would take a bullet for the people at that table. And in a way, he thinks he is taking one slow evening at a time. His kids will grow up saying, "Dad worked so hard for us." And they will mean it as praise. And it will be praise. And it will also be the only version of him they ever got. Watch what has happened in both of those houses. Availability turned into a measure of goodness. The best Christian became the busiest one. The most loving parent became the most depleted one. Exhaustion stopped being a cost and started being a credential. And once that trade is made, rest stops being a need and becomes a confession. Slowing down feels like admitting you care less than the people still running. Now, before we go one step further, something has to be said plainly. Because half the people watching this have their guard up right now. And honestly, that guard is there for a good reason. The Bible is not against hard work. Scripture honors work on nearly every page of it. The book of Proverbs talks about the sluggard with open contempt. The man whose field is grown over with thorns while he asks for a little more sleep. A little more folding of the hands. Paul told one church flat out, "If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat." He held up his own calloused hands as proof that he practiced it. From the first garden to the last city, Scripture treats diligence as a form of love. Lazy is never a compliment in this book. So, this video is not going to tell you that working hard is the problem. It is going to tell you something more precise. Diligence and endless availability are two different things. And somewhere in the last generation or two, we stitched them together and called the seam holiness. Diligence is doing your work with your whole heart, and then setting it down. Endless availability is the belief that setting it down, ever, for any reason, is a small betrayal of everyone counting on you. One of those is a virtue with a long biblical pedigree. The other is a treadmill wearing a virtue's clothes. and it is quietly grinding down some of the most faithful people in the church. The meal train woman, the dinner table man, you, which leaves a real question standing. If Scripture honors work this much, and yet human beings clearly were never built to run without ceasing, then where does rest actually sit in God's design? Is it a pit stop, a reward, a concession to weakness? The answer is older than your job, older than your church, older than human exhaustion itself. It is sitting on the first page of the Bible, inside the only work week that has ever truly been finished. And it starts with light. In the beginning, before any of us owed anybody anything, God went to work. Read the first chapter of Genesis slowly sometime, out loud, and you will notice something underneath the story. It has a beat. Light gets called out of darkness, and then the text pauses to mark time. There was evening, and there was morning. The first day, waters get pushed back and pinned behind boundaries. Sky above, sea below. Evening, morning, the second day. Dry land rises. Green comes crawling up out of it. Grass, seed, orchard. Evening, morning, day 3. Work, then a closing, effort, then an edge. Day after day, the pattern repeats like a drumbeat under the melody, and it never once gets skipped. The sun and moon are hung and given their posts. One to govern the day, one the night, and even the lights of heaven get handed a schedule. Evening, morning, the seas start to churn with life. The sky fills with wings. Evening, morning. Nothing in this account runs on and on. Everything moves in rhythm. And the rhythm itself is part of what God keeps calling good. Then comes the 6th day. And the 6th day is the long one. The land animals come up from the earth. Everything from cattle to the creeping things. And then, late in that day, after everything else has been placed and named and set running, God does something different. He slows down and speaks to himself. Let us make man in our image. Dust from the ground, breath from God, and a man opens his eyes for the first time in the history of the world. Now stop right there and look at the clock, because there is a detail sitting in plain sight that most of us have read past our entire lives. Adam is created near the end of the 6th day. He arrives last, after the light, after the seas, after the orchards heavy with fruit, after every animal, which means the man wakes up inside a world where the work is essentially done. He did not haul the ocean into place. He did not plant Eden. He contributed exactly nothing to any of it, because he did not exist yet. He opens his eyes in the late gold of day 6, surrounded on every side by finished things. And then the sun goes down on the only partial day he has ever lived. Evening comes, then morning, and the next day, the first complete day of this man's life, the first full sunrise to sunset a human being ever experiences, is the 7th. On the 7th day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the 7th day and made it holy. Sit with the order of events, because the order is the message. The first thing on Adam's calendar was not a task. The man had no achievements, no output, no history of usefulness. He had been alive for part of one afternoon. He had earned, in the strictest accounting, nothing at all. And his first full day was a blessed, holy day of rest, spent in the presence of the God who had done all the working. Humanity's first full day was a day off. Every one of us runs the math in the other direction. Work first, rest after, prove yourself. Then permission, empty the list. Then the couch. That math feels so obvious, so basically moral, that we assume it must be God's math too. And the first page of his book says otherwise. In Eden, rest is not the paycheck at the end of the week. Rest is the inheritance at the start of it. Adam rested before he had done 1 hour of work. Because rest was never invented as a payment. It was built into the architecture of the world. The same way the evenings were. The same way the mornings were. Load-bearing. Part of the frame. And that is the first of the 4 truths. And notice that the story proved it before we ever said it out loud. God designed human life with rest built into it. Before anyone had earned anything. Rest is not a wage. It never was a wage. You were welcomed into the rhythm first and handed the plow second. And any voice inside you insisting you must finish the list to deserve the evening is reciting a rule that Eden never heard of. That is truth number 1. The foundation the other 3 stand on. But it comes with a question hiding inside it. And the question is sharp enough that we have to deal with it before we can go any further. Because someone is already asking it. Why would God rest at all? He does not get tired. So what exactly was he doing on that 7th day? And what does it have to do with creatures like us, who do? The prophet Isaiah asks a question and answers it in the same breath. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. Hold that verse up next to Genesis, and you can feel the tension. Genesis says God rested. Isaiah says God never gets tired. Both are scripture. So whatever happened on that 7th day, it cannot mean that the creator of the universe was worn out and needed to lie down. God did not rest the way a roofer rests in August. Something else is going on. And the something else matters enormously for how you think about your own tiredness. The word in Genesis carries the sense of ceasing, stopping. On the 7th day, God stopped, stepped back from the finished work, and delighted in it. He had already been doing a version of this all week, pausing at the end of each day to look at what he had made and call it good. The 7th day is that pause grown to full size. It is completion, enjoyed. A master builder walking the floors of a finished house. Not because his arms gave out, but because finishing is a thing worth savoring. And savoring takes time. And he decided that time was holy. So divine rest is not recovery. It is celebration, which changes the entire logic of the 7th day. Because now watch what it means for you. If rest were only for the exhausted, God would never have modeled it. Because God is never exhausted. He built a stop into the week anyway. The one being in the universe with no limits chose to honor a limit he did not have. And then he turned to creatures who are nothing but limits. Creatures who spend 1/3 of their lives unconscious. Who break down without food every few hours. Whose bodies wear out and give out. And he handed us that same rhythm as a gift. Here is what that does to the shame. Your need for rest is not a design flaw. You were never meant to be the exception. The one creature who runs without ceasing in a universe where even its maker stops. When you hit your limit at the end of a long day, you have not failed some test of faithfulness. You have bumped into your own blueprint. God does not grow weary because he is God. You grow weary because you are not. And the growing weary is one of the honest ways your body keeps telling you so. That is the theology, and it holds. But theology on a page is one thing, believing it with your whole nervous system, on the worst night of your life, is another thing entirely. So Scripture does not leave this as a doctrine. It shows it to us. In the life of a man who hit his limit harder than almost anyone in the Bible, a man at the top of his calling, hours after the greatest public victory of his career, face down in the dirt, asking God to kill him. What heaven did with that man is where we go next. To feel the bottom of this story, you have to see the top first. And the top is one of the most spectacular days in the entire Old Testament. Mount Carmel, roughly 850 years before Christ. The northern kingdom of Israel has spent years sliding into the worship of Baal, dragged there by King Ahab and his queen, Jezebel, who has been hunting down the prophets of the Lord and killing them. Drought has strangled the land for 3.5 years. Because a prophet named Elijah stood in front of the king and said it would not rain again until he said so. And now that same Elijah has called for a showdown. All Israel gathered on the mountain. 450 prophets of Baal on one side, one man on the other. The rules were simple. 2 altars, 2 sacrifices, no fire. Each side calls on its god. The God who answers with fire is God. The prophets of Baal went first, and they went all day. They cried out from morning until noon. They danced around their altar. They limped. They raved. They cut themselves with swords and lances until the blood ran, which was how their religion begged. Noon came and went. Elijah started needling them from the sidelines. Shout louder. Maybe he is thinking. Maybe he is traveling. Maybe he is asleep and needs waking. The afternoon burned away, and there was no voice, no answer, nothing. Then Elijah called the people close. He rebuilt the broken altar of the Lord. 12 stones for 12 tribes. He dug a trench around it. And then he did the thing nobody does when they are trying to start a fire. He had them soak it. 4 jars of water over the sacrifice and the wood. Then again. Then a 3rd time. Until the water ran down and filled the trench. Until every splinter was drenched and the whole thing stood there dripping. Impossible. And Elijah prayed one short prayer. No dancing. No blood. Maybe 30 seconds of plain speech. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God. The fire of the Lord fell. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust, and it licked the water up out of the trench. Stones. It burned the stones. And all the people fell on their faces and cried out the words Elijah had waited his whole life to hear from them. The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. The false prophets were seized and executed in the valley below. Then Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bowed down, and prayed for rain. And a cloud the size of a man's hand came up out of the sea and grew until the sky went black. And the drought of 3.5 years broke open in a downpour. And Elijah, flooded with the power of God, tucked his cloak into his belt and outran the king's chariot 17 miles to the gates of Jezreel. That was the greatest day of Elijah's life. One man against a nation, and the nation came home. If ministry had a scoreboard, no prophet ever posted a bigger number in a single afternoon. Now, count the hours, because what happens next happens fast. The queen hears the report. Jezebel, who did not fall on her face with the crowd, sends Elijah a message. So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of those prophets by this time tomorrow. A death threat with a deadline. One furious woman. One sentence. And the man who faced down 450 prophets. The man who mocked them at noon and prayed down fire at dusk. The man who outran a chariot in the rain, gets up and runs for his life. He runs south, out of Israel entirely, down the length of Judah, all the way to Beersheba, the last town before the wilderness, roughly 100 miles. There he leaves his servant behind, which is its own quiet detail. A man walking away from his last human companion. And he keeps going, a full day deeper into the desert, alone, until he finds a broom tree. The scrubby desert bush that offers the only shade for miles. He sits down under it. And there, the prophet of fire prays to die. It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. It is enough. Listen to that sentence. Not a theological statement. Just the sound a soul makes when it runs completely dry. I am done. I have nothing left. The tank is empty, and the road behind me swallowed everything I had. Now, be careful here, because it would be easy to reach for modern labels. And this story deserves better than a diagnosis from a distance of 28 centuries. We are not going to do that. We are just going to lay the two scenes side by side and let you look at them. Greatest victory of his life. Deepest collapse of his life. Not years apart. Days apart. The order matters more than any label. The collapse did not come from failure. It came directly out of the triumph, on its heels, attached to it. And if you have ever lived through your own small version of that, you already understand it in your body. The big project ships, and the week after, you can barely get off the couch. The wedding you spent a year planning ends, and the blues roll in with the thank you notes. The ministry event you poured yourself into succeeds beyond your prayers. And Monday morning, you sit in your car in the parking lot and cannot make yourself open the door. Triumph does not refill a person. Triumph is spent out of a person. And the bigger the victory, the bigger the withdrawal. And nobody warns you that the bill shows up right after the celebration. So there he is, the most powerful prophet alive, 100 miles past empty, under the only tree in the desert, asking God for death. He falls asleep, which is what the truly finished do. Not strategic sleep, surrender sleep. Now watch very closely what heaven sends to a man who just said he wants to die, because it is not a sermon. The next thing Elijah feels is a touch. An angel of the Lord is standing over him under the broom tree, and the angel touches him and says two words, "Arise and eat." Elijah opens his eyes, and there, at his head, close enough to smell, is a cake of bread baking on hot stones, and a jar of water. Stop the scene right there and look at what is actually in front of him, because this may be the single most tender detail in the Old Testament. Bread on hot stones takes time. Coals have to be gathered and lit. Dough has to be laid on, watched, turned, which means that while the prophet of Israel lay unconscious in the dirt praying for death, Someone from heaven knelt in the sand next to him and cooked. Think about every word that could have been waiting for Elijah when he opened his eyes. Where is your faith? Elijah, did the fire on Carmel mean nothing? You outran a chariot yesterday, and today you run from one woman. There were 100 sermons available at that moment, and some of them would have even been true. Heaven preached none of them. No rebuke, no correction, not one syllable about the running or the despair or the death wish. The first message God sent to his broken servant was warm bread and cold water, delivered with a touch, served with 2 words. Elijah eats, he drinks, and then, the text says, he lay down again. He goes right back to sleep, and heaven lets him. No one shakes him and says we have a schedule. The God who once fed this man by ravens at a brook now guards his nap in the wilderness, and the desert stays quiet, and the prophet sleeps like a dead man under the one shade tree in 100 miles. Then it happens again. The angel of the Lord comes back, a second time, touches him again, and says, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." More bread, more water, a second meal, a second rest. And inside that sentence, one of the gentlest diagnoses in Scripture, the journey is too great for you. Not, you are too weak for the journey. Though a lesser storyteller would have written it that way. The problem is not named as Elijah's smallness. It is named as the road's bigness. Heaven looks at an exhausted man and locates the trouble outside him, in the sheer size of what he has been carrying. And then heaven does something about it. And the something is food and sleep. And notice what still has not happened. There is no conversation yet. God has questions for Elijah, real ones. And there is a recommissioning coming, a new assignment, a successor to anoint, work that will occupy the rest of the prophet's life. All of it waits. The famous scene at Mount Horeb, the wind and the earthquake and the fire and the low whisper. The question, what are you doing here, Elijah? All of that comes later, 40 days down the road, after the strength from this food has carried him there. Read the chapter in order, and the order is unmistakable. Sleep first, food first, sleep again, food again, then the journey, then, only then, the talk, and after the talk, the work. Heaven's triage for a burned-out servant, preserved in Scripture. And step 1 and step 2 are a meal and a nap. The first truth said rest was built into your design from the very first week of the world. This is what that truth looks like when the design hits its breaking point. God does not shame the limit. He feeds it. He does not stand over his collapsed servant demanding an explanation before care. The explanation can wait 40 days. The bread cannot. And that lands on somebody watching this right now. So let it be said plainly. Just once. There are seasons of a life where the most spiritual thing available to you is a real meal and a full night of sleep. And if that sounds too low, too physical, too unspiritual to count with God, 1 Kings chapter 19 would like a word. That is not a self-care slogan retrofitted onto the Bible. That is the plain sequence of the text. The God of Israel looked at his most exhausted servant and prescribed dinner and a pillow. Twice. Before he said anything else at all. And when the darkness in a person runs deeper than tiredness, part of God's provision is other people. And letting them help carry you is not weakness either. Elijah got an angle. Most of us get each other. Take the help. But maybe you are still holding out. And maybe your reason sounds like this. Elijah was in crisis. Elijah had already collapsed. Fine. When a person breaks down completely, of course, they need rest. That is an emergency measure. My situation is different. I am still standing. I am still needed. The people counting on me are real. The work in front of me is real. Nothing about my life is finished. And stopping now would mean letting actual human beings down. That is the harder question. And it deserves a harder answer than a proverb. It deserves a test case. So, take that logic. The needs are real. Therefore, I cannot step away and watch it walk straight into the life of the busiest man who ever lived. Because his crowds were real too, and they were still waiting when he left. Word travels fast in Galilee, and it travels fastest when it carries hope. Somewhere in those early months, a leper walked back into his village with clean skin, and after that, there was no containing it. The Gospel of Luke marks the moment with the dry precision of a man tracking a wildfire. Now, even more, the report about him went abroad, and great crowds gathered to hear him and to be healed of their infirmities. Even more, the line was already long, and now it grew. Picture what that actually looked like on the ground. This is a world with no hospitals, no clinics, no medicine worth the name. If your child burned with fever, you held her and prayed and waited. And sometimes the waiting ended badly, and everyone you knew had buried somebody. Into that world comes a rumor. There is a man in Capernaum, and he touched the untouchable, and they are healed. Every time. No failures. No waiting list. No fee. What would you have done? You would have done what they did. They came walking, limping, carried on mats. They came leading blind fathers by the hand. 4 men in Capernaum could not get their paralyzed friend through the door. So they went up the outside stairs and tore the roof open over Jesus' head and lowered the mat down through the hole with ropes. That is the pressure this ministry lived under. People did not knock politely on this man's life. They dug through the ceiling, and every healing made it worse. That is the arithmetic nobody talks about. Every miracle sent a healed person home to a village full of sick neighbors. And the healed man's own testimony became the next crowd's marching orders. He fixed me. He can fix you. Come on. Success did not shrink the need. Success multiplied the need. The better Jesus did his work, the longer the line outside became. If anyone who has ever been good at something is watching this, that sentence just landed somewhere tender. You know exactly how that works. Be the dependable one at your job, and watch the assignments find you. Be the strong one in your family, and watch every crisis root itself to your phone. Be the woman from chapter 2, the one who never stops, and watch the church stack one more ministry onto the pile, because you are so faithful with the others. Competence is a magnet. Doing your work well is the surest way to be handed more of it. And the line outside your life gets longer precisely because you keep serving the people in it. So here stands Jesus, at the center of the neediest crowd in Israel, with hands that actually hold the cure. Every single face in that line is a real person with a real disease. Nobody in it is faking. And underneath the noise of the crowd sits a brutal fact of arithmetic. He is one man, in one body, in one village at a time. The need in Galilee is functionally infinite. His hours in a day are not, Now read the very next verse, the one Luke sets right against the swelling crowds, and read it slowly, because the whole chapter turns on it. But he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. The grammar there is doing quiet, heavy work. This is not the record of one retreat, one bad week, one overwhelmed evening. The verb describes a pattern, a repeated practice, a groove worn into the ministry. The crowds kept growing, and he kept withdrawing. Both of those clauses are habitual, and they run side by side through the whole gospel. Like rails, more people came, he often left. More people came, he often left. And now, stand in the sandals of someone in that crowd, because this is where the verse gets uncomfortable. On the nights Jesus was away in the wilderness praying, the sick were still sick, somewhere back in the villages. A woman who had walked 2 days to reach him arrived to find him gone. A father stood at the edge of town scanning the road, holding a feverish little boy, asking strangers, "Where is the healer?" and getting shrugs. Those people were not hypothetical. The need did not pause politely while he prayed. He withdrew anyway, and he withdrew often. And the gospel writers, who adored him, wrote it down without a flicker of embarrassment. Let that collide, head on, with the rule from chapter 1. You may rest when everything important is finished. Jesus rested when nothing was finished. He stepped away with the line still out the door, with legitimate life and death needs still unmet. Needs he had the actual power to meet, by the standard so many believers hold themselves to, the standard that keeps you answering emails at 11 at night. The sinless Son of God was falling short, which means the standard is broken. It has to be. One of them is wrong, your rule or his practice. And his practice is on every page. There is one door left open to escape this, and it is time to close it. The objection goes, well, he was the Son of God. He operated by different rules. We cannot pattern our limits on him. And the answer is that the objection has it exactly backward. He is the one fully faithful human being who ever lived, tempted in every way as we are, without sin. If anything, his humanity is the only one we can fully trust. The only life where we can watch what a person is supposed to do with a body's limits and a world's needs. And what he did was work with everything in him. Heal until sundown. Teach until hoarse. To give himself away in quantities that alarmed his own family. And then, often, leave. He did not heal every sick person in Israel. He did not visit every village. Whole towns never saw his face. And he went to the cross and said to his Father, I have finished the work you gave me to do. The work God gave him, not the work the crowd assigned him. Those were never the same list, and he never once confused them. He knew the difference between everything that could be done and everything the Father asked him to do. That distinction was where his rest lived. It is where yours will live too. Or nowhere. If this is starting to sound almost too generous to be true, if something in you is whispering, surely he would never say this out loud. Surely stepping away is just the unspoken exception. Then stay right here. Because one afternoon, he did say it out loud, in the middle of a workday, to 12 exhausted men, while the crowd was standing right there needing them. It is one of the shortest commands he ever gave. And for some of you, it will be the hardest one in this entire video to obey. The 12 came back from their first mission trip, talking over each other. Jesus had sent them out in pairs, 2b2, into the villages of Galilee, with authority over unclean spirits and instructions to travel light, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts. It was their first taste of real ministry. Out from under his shadow, their own hands on the work, and it had gone gloriously. They cast out demons. They anointed the sick with oil, and the sick got well. Now they came flooding back to him like sons home from a first harvest, all of them reporting at once. And you can hear the joy under the text. We did it. It worked. Teacher, you should have seen it. And Mark, writing this scene down, adds one of those details that convinces you an eyewitness is behind the story. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. They could not eat. Read that plainly. The crowds around Jesus had grown so thick, the coming and going so constant, that 12 grown men, fresh off the road, hungry from travel, could not get a meal to their mouths. Every time the bread came out, another need walked up, another question, another mat, another mother pulling a child through the crush. This is ministry succeeding. Understand, this is the dream scenario. The growing church, the packed calendar, the full house. And inside the dream scenario, the workers are quietly starving in plain sight. Some of you have eaten that lunch. It is cold coffee at a desk at 2 in the afternoon. It is a granola bar in the car between your kids' practice and the church meeting. It is the pastor's wife grabbing crackers behind the sanctuary between services. The work is good. The work is fruitful. And the workers cannot eat. And everyone involved has decided this is normal. Now watch the teacher, because he sees it. He looks at 12, flushed, happy, hollow-eyed men who cannot finish a piece of bread. And he issues a command, not a suggestion. And this matters. In the Greek and in any honest English, it is an imperative. The same grammatical shape as follow me. He says, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. Sit with how strange that sentence is in a world like ours. Here is the leader of a movement at its moment of maximum momentum. Any modern organization would pour gasoline on this. Book the bigger venue. Add the second service. Ride the wave. Instead, the leader looks at his best people at the height of their success. At the exact hour when the crowds are largest and the opportunities are richest. And he orders a retreat. He does not praise them for skipping meals. He does not hold up their hunger as devotion. He sees it as a problem. And he acts on it. Personally, get in the boat. We are leaving. And here is the second of the 4 truths. And this time, you do not have to take it from a narrator, because it comes straight from the mouth of Jesus. He allowed himself and his disciples to step away, even while real needs remained unmet. The existence of a need, even a desperate one, even one they had the power to meet, did not automatically mean they were the ones assigned to meet it in that hour. Come away and rest is a command of Christ. It sits in the same gospel as go and make disciples, spoken by the same voice, carrying the same authority. And one of the 2 commands has been almost entirely forgotten by the people most devoted to the other. So they pulled away from the shore, the boat easing out onto the lake, the noise of the crowd thinning across the water behind them. For the length of that crossing, maybe an hour, maybe 2. 12 men had nothing to do, no line, No mats, no question. Just water sounds and bread finally reaching mouths, and the particular sweetness of a rest that has been ordered by someone with the authority to order it. Then the boat came around toward the shore, and somebody looked up, and the beach was full. The crowd had watched the boat leave and read its heading, and they had run around the top of the lake, on foot, through the towns, gathering more people as they went, thousands of them streaming along the shoreline, and they beat the boat there. When Jesus stepped out of his own retreat, the retreat was over before it began. The desolate place had 5,000 men in it, plus women and children, all of them looking at him. Now, be honest about what you would feel in that moment, because the disciples surely felt it. The one break we get, the one afternoon, and here they are anyway. If the story ended here, it would prove the cynic right, and you can almost hear the cynic saying it. See, rest is a fantasy. The need always finds you. Might as well not bother trying. But watch what Jesus does, because both halves of what he does matter, and people only ever preach one of them. He does not resent the crowd. Mark says that when he saw them, he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he taught them, long into the afternoon. And when the hour grew late, he took 5 loaves and 2 fish, and fed every last one of them until they were satisfied. With 12 baskets left over, the interruption was real, and he met it with a full heart. Sometimes rest gets invaded by genuine need, and love answers the door. That is true, and this story honors it. But the story does not end with the miracle. And this is the part that gets left out of almost every sermon on this passage. Read what happens immediately after the last basket is gathered. Immediately, Mark says, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead. Made them. The same forceful hand that ordered the retreat now orders the evacuation. Then he himself dismissed the crowd. Thousands of people sent home, and after he had taken leave of them, he went up on the mountain to pray, alone. At night, the rest that got interrupted at noon was taken back before midnight. There it is, the whole pattern in one day. The retreat was invaded, and he served. Then he ended the serving, cleared the room, and finished the rest. Interrupted rest was not abandoned rest. It was postponed, and then it was kept, like an appointment with his Father that could be moved but never cancelled. That distinction is worth the whole chapter, because your rest will get interrupted. The baby will wake up. The phone will ring. The genuine emergency will land on the one afternoon you protected, and you will do what love does. You will answer the door. The question that decides the shape of your life is what happens after. Whether the interrupted rest quietly dies, the way it has died 100 times before, or whether, like your Lord, you send the crowd home when the serving is done, and climb the mountain anyway. So count where we stand, because 2 of the 4 truths are now on the table. Rest is built into your design, and it was there before you earned anything. And stepping away can be faithful, even while real needs go unmet, on the authority of Christ himself. Which raises a question that should be bothering you by now. If the design permits rest, and the Lord commands rest, why is stopping still so hard? Why does the phone still end up in the hand at 10:47? Because the tallest wall between you and rest was never on your calendar. It is in you, and it has a voice. There is a mother of 3 who has a sentence, she says, almost every day. And she believes it is about efficiency. It is easier if I just do it myself. The lunches, the forms, the rides, the smoothing over of every small sibling war. Her husband offers to take things off her plate, and she says he loads the dishwasher wrong. Her oldest is 12 and could make her own breakfast, and somehow never has to. Everyone in that house orbits the mother, and the mother is exhausted, and the mother built the orbit. If she stepped back, the family would wobble for 2 weeks and then find its feet. And some part of her knows that, and some deeper part of her is quietly terrified of it. Because if they can find their feet without her, then what exactly is she? There is a team lead who has not turned his phone fully off in 6 years. He tells people it is because the team might need him. And the team does sometimes need him. So the story holds. But watch him on vacation. Watch him check the group chat from the beach. Not because there is a crisis, but because there might be one. And if there were one, and someone else solved it, that would sit worse with him than the crisis itself. He has never once said this out loud. He would deny it in those words. But the phone stays on. And there is the church volunteer who has said yes so many years in a row that yes has become her name. She is afraid of one thing, and it is oddly specific. She is afraid that the first no will echo backward, that the moment she declines, people will reconsider all the times she agreed, and the whole record will be repriced. And she will go from the woman who never stops to the woman who used to help. So she keeps saying yes. Less and less out of joy. More and more out of maintenance. 3 different lives. 1 engine under all of them. And here it is in a single sentence. Being needed can feel remarkably similar to being valuable. Similar enough to fool almost anyone. When the texts come in, when the family cannot function without you, when the church would fall apart if you sat down, it feels like proof of worth, arriving daily, in measurable doses. And once it feels like that, something subtle flips. The serving stops being purely a gift you give them and becomes, partly, a medicine you take. Their need becomes your supply. And nobody willingly gives up their own supply. That is why the phone ends up in the hand at 10:47. That is why rest feels like loss instead of gift. Stopping does not just pause the work, it pauses the proof. Now, you could spend years in a counselor's office circling that knot, and some people should. But it turns out God already designed a test for exactly this. It sits in the book of Exodus, and on the surface it looks like nothing more than a grocery run. Every morning, for 40 years, an entire nation walked out of their tents to pick up food. And hidden inside the daily routine was a question aimed at the exact fear we have been talking about. Can you stop gathering and trust that you will still be provided for? The test happens in a desert, at dawn, and the bread is already on the ground. An entire nation is camped in one of the least survivable places on earth, and they are hungry. This is the wilderness of sin. Week 6, after the Exodus from Egypt. Behind them, the Red Sea and a lifetime of slavery. Ahead of them, gravel and heat shimmer to the horizon. Whatever food they carried out of Egypt is gone or going. And you can hear it in the camp. Because the book of Exodus records exactly what a hungry nation sounds like. They grumble. And listen to what the grumbling says. Because it is one of the saddest sentences in the Bible. Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. They are homesick for slavery. Egypt broke their backs and drowned their sons. And hunger has already sanded the memory down to this: at least there was food. That is what fear of scarcity does to human beings. It edits the past, shrinks the future, and makes chains look like security because the chains came with dinner. God hears the grumbling, and his answer comes with no lightning attached. Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you. But read the whole verse, because tucked into the middle of the promise is a phrase most people skim right past. The people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not, that I may test them. Hold on to those 4 words. God is not just going to feed this nation. He is going to feed them in a way that examines them. What exactly is being measured? The story has not said yet. Keep the phrase in your pocket. It is the key to everything that happens on the 7th morning. That evening, quail cover the camp, and in the morning, the miracle that will define a generation makes its quiet debut. Dew lies on the ground around the camp, ordinary desert dew. And when the sun climbs and the dew burns off, something is left behind. A fine, flake-like thing. The text says, fine as frost on the ground. It is lying everywhere, pale on the gravel, in every direction, as far as a person can walk. And the people of Israel come out of their tents and stand there looking down at it and say to one another, man who, which in Hebrew means, what is it? They named their food with a question. Manna. What is it? For 40 years. This nation will eat a question every morning. And the name never stops being honest, because they never do figure out what it is. The text offers what details it can. White, like coriander seed. Tastes like wafers made with honey. And beyond that, the bread stays a mystery. They could not explain it. They could only eat it. Now come the rules. And the rules are where this stops being a story about food. Rule 1. Gather a day's portion. An omer per person. Roughly 2 quarts. Measured by household. Each family taking what its people need for this day. And the text adds a line of quiet astonishment. Some gathered more. Some gathered less. But when they measured it, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. The portions came out even. Nobody built a surplus, and nobody starved. In the economy of manna, hoarding produced no advantage, and weakness produced no shortfall. And you can feel how deeply strange that would be to people raised under Egypt's economy, where the strong stockpiled and the weak went without. Rule 2. And here is the blade. Let no one leave any of it over till the morning. Eat today's bread today. Keep nothing back. No reserves. No rainy day jar. No, just in case. Every crumb of security you have when your head hits the mat tonight is the character of the God who rained bread this morning and said he would do it again tomorrow. And some of them could not do it. Of course they could not. The text says it without surprise, as if it knew us all in advance. They did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it till the morning. You understand these people, because you are these people. It is just prudence. They told themselves, tucking a little aside in the tent. It is just being responsible. What if the sky forgets? What if tomorrow the gravel is bare and my children are looking at me." Morning came. They went to their hidden jars, and the saved manna had bred worms and stank. The Hebrew is that blunt: worms and stink. The bread of heaven, held back against God's word, rotted overnight into something crawling. And the rot is not a punishment stapled onto the story. The rot is the lesson itself. Manna was built with an expiration date, on purpose. And the expiration date was the point. This bread could be eaten but never stockpiled, received but never banked. God was teaching a freed slave nation where security actually lives. And the answer was not in the jar. It was in the character of the one who filled the sky. Their safety was never the leftovers. It was the promise that tomorrow morning the bread would be lying on the ground again. And it was. Morning after morning after morning, the sun came up, the dew burned off, and the "what is it" lay pale on the desert floor, faithful as the light. Then, on the sixth morning, the rules changed. Gather twice as much today. Moses told them, 2 omers per person. Bake what you will bake. Boil what you will boil. And whatever is left, lay it up to be kept till morning. The exact thing forbidden every other day of the week was suddenly commanded, and that night the impossible held its breath. The saved manna did not rot. No worms, no stink, sweet at sunrise as it had been at sundown. Because tomorrow, Moses said, is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Tomorrow, nobody goes out to work. Tomorrow, the sky rains nothing. The gravel stays bare. And every family in this camp eats yesterday's bread and rests. And understand who is hearing this command. For generations, as far back as any of them could remember, these people had made bricks for Egypt. And slaves do not get days off. Rest was not in their bones. It was about to be commanded into them. The next morning, the fields around the camp lay empty for the first time in a week, or at least they were supposed to. The 7th morning came up over the camp, and everything was exactly as promised. The bread in the jars was sweet. That is worth standing still for, because it is the quietest miracle in the whole chapter. Yesterday's manna, the leftovers, the very thing that had crawled with worms every other night of the week, sat in every tent in Israel perfectly whole. A family could wake, reach for the jar, and eat, without one foot touching the ground outside. The provision was already home. The whole camp had proof, in hand, at arm's reach, that God had kept his word down to the crumb. Nothing needed doing. Nothing needed gathering. For the first time in living memory, an entire people had absolutely nowhere to be. And Exodus chapter 16, verse 27, reads like this. On the 7th day, some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. They went out anyway. Put the camera low and watch it happen. Dawn on the Sabbath. Then skiet, and a flap opens. A figure slips out with a basket on one hip, glancing sideways, walking out past the edge of camp to the gathering grounds. Then another from a different row of tents. A handful of them, out on the gravel in the early light, bent at the waist. In that particular posture, the whole nation had learned that year. Eyes down, hands ready, working the ground. And the ground has nothing on it. For the first morning in a week, the desert floor is just desert floor. So there they are, The strangest picture in the book of Exodus. People harvesting a field that heaven deliberately left empty, combing bare gravel for a bread that is already sitting in their tents. Ask the only question that matters. What were they looking for? Not food. Say that clearly, because it changes everything. Hunger did not send them out there. Their breakfast was in the jar at home, sweet and guaranteed. Whatever pulled them off their mats before dawn and bent their backs over empty ground. It was not their stomachs. Now, take out the phrase you have been carrying since the 6th morning. That I may test them. God said from the very beginning that this bread was an examination. And here, on the 7th day, the exam finally shows its true face. It was never a test of gathering. Any slave of Egypt could gather. They had done nothing else for as long as anyone could remember. Sunrise to sunset, quota after quota, production as survival, production as identity, production as the whole of life. Egypt had built exactly one muscle in these people, and it never stopped flexing. No, the test was always aimed at the other thing, the thing slavery had burned out of them. Could they stop? When God himself said enough, when the provision was already in hand, when the day was blessed and holy and nothing remained to be done, could they simply stay home and rest and let him hold the world for one day? Some of them could not. The jar was full, and they went looking anyway, because the jar was never really the issue. What they could not put down was the gathering itself. The handful on the gravel that morning were not hungry for bread. They were hungry for the getting of bread, for the security of their own hands moving, for the feeling that their tomorrow was something they were personally building. Standing still felt more dangerous than working an empty field. That is the whole picture. They trusted their own gathering more than his giving. Even with his giving sitting proven in their tents, and the Lord's response comes down. And notice the tone of it, because it is not thunder. It is something closer to grief. How long will you refuse to keep my commandments? Refuse. He calls the empty-handed morning what it was. Not a scheduling error, not overcommitment, a refusal. I know, said with the body, to a gift already delivered. And there it is. The third truth, lying out on that empty gravel where they went looking for what they already had. Rest becomes an act of trust precisely when the work is still unfinished. Anyone can stop when everything is done. There is no faith in that, and no test either. Which is exactly why God never waits for everything to be done before commanding the stop. Stopping while the manna is still out there. Stopping while the list still has items on it. Stopping on nothing but the strength of God, said, tomorrow is covered. That is where trust leaves the realm of things you say and becomes something you do with your actual body on an actual morning. Work asks, what can I accomplish? Rest asks, what happens if I stop? And the second question is the frightening one, because your hands cannot answer it. Only your faith can. So, before we leave this desert, look once more at those figures on the gravel, and then look closer to home. A person on a couch at 10:47 at night, refreshing an inbox that has nothing new in it, providing for no one, accomplishing nothing, unable to stop scanning the ground. That is a Sabbath morning gatherer with better lighting. Same bent back, same empty field, same refusal, dressed in a bathrobe. The question underneath them both is identical, and it is time to say it to your face. What are you afraid will happen if you stop? One man answered that question in the most public way imaginable. He fell asleep. In an open boat, in a storm that had professional sailors screaming, in front of 12 witnesses who never forgot it. You have been to this boat before. It was the first thing you saw in this story. Now you know enough to climb aboard. The day had been enormous, even by his standards. Mark chapter 4 opens with Jesus teaching beside the Sea of Galilee, and the crowd on the shore growing so large that it pushes him backward off the land. He gets into a boat and teaches from the water, the little hull rocking under him. His voice carrying over the heads of a crowd Mark calls a very large crowd, even for him. And he teaches for hours, parable after parable. The sower, the lamp, the mustard seed. The kingdom of God laid out picture by picture for people who could not get enough of it. Anyone who has ever taught anything knows what that costs. Hours of full output for a crowd, hanging on every word. By sundown, the man in that boat had poured out everything. And when evening came, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." Mark the detail, small as it is. They took him in the boat, just as he was. No going ashore first. No meal. No pause. Straight from the last parable to the open water. Spent, and other boats came along with him. Which means what happens next had an audience beyond the 12. Now, before one wave rises, nail down this one fact, because for somebody watching this video, it will matter more than anything else in the chapter. The storm they are sailing into is sitting directly on the path of obedience. Crossing the lake was not the disciples' idea. There was no detour, no wandering off course, no decision made in weakness. "Let us go across," was his sentence, his instruction, and the storm rose up in the exact middle of doing what he said. Write that down somewhere in yourself. The wind and the exhaustion and the water coming over the sides do not automatically mean you took a wrong turn. Some storms are on the route. This one was, and it was a real one. The Sea of Galilee sits almost 700 feet below sea level, ringed by steep hills cut with ravines. And when cool air spills down those ravines onto the warm surface of the lake, the water can go from calm to violent in minutes. Mark says a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. This is past spray and discomfort. This is water gaining on the bailing. A hull growing heavier by the minute, and at least 4 of the men aboard. Peter, Andrew, James, John, are professional fishermen who have worked this lake their whole lives. They know exactly how much trouble they are in, which is why what the text says next lands the way it lands. These men, these particular men, concluded they were going to die tonight, and Jesus was in the stern, asleep on the cushion of all the details the gospel writers preserved across 4 accounts of this man's life. Here is one of the humblest and one of the heaviest. Mark does not say a cushion. He says the cushion, the low pillow or rower's pad kept in the stern of a working boat. Somebody knew it was there. A tired man made his way to the back of that boat, found the one soft thing aboard, put his head down on it, and gave himself to sleep. Hold that beside the bread, baking on hot stones next to Elijah's head, because it is the same signature. The God who cooked for his broken prophet is the God who, in the flesh, knew where the pillow was. This sleep is not collapse. It is not a man passing out mid-task. It is deliberate, sought out, arranged. He was exhausted the way humans get exhausted. And he did the most human thing in the world. He went and lay down. And the storm did not wake him. Water coming over the gunwales. The hull wallowing. Grown men shouting over the wind. And the stern of the boat holds one man sleeping like a child in his father's house, which he was. That is the whole secret of the scene. And we will come back to it, because now they wake him, grab him, surely, shake him in the dark and the spray. And of everything 12 terrified men could have yelled over a storm. Here is the sentence that came out. Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? You have heard that question before. It opened this video. But hear it now with everything you have walked through since. Because now you know whose question it really is. Do you not care? They looked at rest in the middle of crisis and read it as absence of love. To their eyes, in that moment, a sleeping Christ and an indifferent Christ looked identical. If you cared, you would be up. If you cared, you would be bailing. If you cared, you would be doing something. Because caring and doing are the same thing. Are they not? That is the sentence you say to yourself every time you sit down. Every mother who has ever rested for 1 hour and felt like a deserter. Every man who has taken a Saturday and spent it guilty. Every believer whose chest tightens the moment the laptop closes. Has a small voice aboard their boat yelling the same accusation. If you cared, you would not be resting. The disciples just said it out loud to his face and got it into the Bible so that every one of us could finally look at the accusation in good light and watch what he does with it. He got up and he did not address the men first. He addressed the weather. He rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased. And there was a great calm. 2 words to a hurricane. The way you would speak to a dog that knows you. And the same voice that had been saying, "Let there be," since the 4th verse of Genesis, said, "Be still," to the sea. And the sea remembered its maker and lay down. Mark says a great calm, the same size word he used for the storm. Great windstorm, great calm. The lake went to glass under the stars. And the only sound left was water dripping off the rigging and 12 men breathing. And then he turned to them and asked his own question. And his question answers theirs. Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? Look at the 2 words he chose to set side by side. Afraid and faith. He drew the line straight from their fear to their trust, as if the shaking in their hands were not a weather problem, but a believing problem. And that is the same line this whole story has been drawing since the desert. The gatherers on the empty gravel, out there because they could not trust tomorrow to God. The disciples screaming in the swamped boat, screaming because they could not trust the storm to God. With God asleep 8 feet away, same wire, connecting the same 2 posts. What you cannot stop doing is the exact shape of what you do not quite believe. And notice what Jesus never does. Not here, not anywhere in the Gospels. He never apologizes for sleeping. Search the scene for it. There is no, "You are right, I should have been up." No defense. No explanation of how much the teaching day had taken out of him. The idea that his rest required forgiveness does not seem to exist anywhere in his mind. He slept without guilt in the one situation guaranteed to generate the accusation. Because his rest was not built on the absence of storms. It was built on the identity of the one who held them. The storm did not stop so that he could sleep. He slept because he knew who held the storm. The men sat in the sudden calm, soaked and shaking. And Mark says they were filled with great fear, a bigger fear than the weather ever gave them, and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" That is the right question. It is the question, and the answer to it is the only pillow that has ever held a human head all the way up. Keep that cushion in your mind. You will see it one more time before this story ends. 3 truths down. Rest is woven into your design. Stepping away can be faithful. Stopping is trust made visible. 1 truth remains, and it is the deepest of the 4, because it is not about your schedule at all, and it never was. It is about your name. It is about who you are when your hands are finally empty. But before we can hear it, you have one question left to answer, and you have been putting it off since chapter 1. It is time to stand on the empty gravel yourself. What are you, actually, afraid of? Let us make this personal, one situation at a time. Find yourself in this list. You are in here somewhere. You run a small business, or you carry a job that behaves like one. And the math in your head goes like this. If I stop taking the extra work, the income dips. If the income dips, the margin thins. If the margin thins and something breaks, the car, the roof, a tooth, we are suddenly in trouble. And the trouble will be my fault, because I am the one who chose to slow down. So you keep saying yes to hours you do not have, and you call it providing, or you are a parent, and the fear wears your child's face. If I stop drilling the math facts, he falls behind. If I stop managing the friendships, she gets hurt. If I ease up anywhere, the gap I leave becomes a gap in them, and they will carry my rest as their deficit for the rest of their lives. So you hover, and you carry, and you call it love. Or you serve at church, and the fear has a pew in it. If I step back from the ministry, who picks it up? You have watched programs die for lack of hands. You do not want to be the reason the doors close on something good. So you stay on the 4th committee, and you call it faithfulness. Or the fear is quieter than any of those, and it lives in other people's heads. If I say no, if I am unreachable for a weekend, if I post nothing and produce nothing and simply go still for a while, what will they think happened to me? Will they think I got lazy, weak, that I stopped caring? Every one of those fears deserves respect, because every one of them is built around something true. Bills are real. Children do need raising. Ministries do need workers. This chapter is not going to insult you by pretending your responsibilities are imaginary. It is going to do something else. It is going to change the question. For 12 chapters, the question on the table has looked like, do you need rest? And that question is finished, because everyone answers yes, and nothing changes. Here is the question that actually runs your life. What do you believe will happen if you take it? Sit inside your honest answer for a moment, because your honest answer is a confession of faith. If your gut says, everything I have built will slip, the kids will suffer, the church will stumble, the clients will scatter, then listen to what that gut is actually preaching. It is preaching a world held up by you, a world where God's portion of the load is the part you cannot reach, and everything else rides on your shoulders, staying under it. Nobody would ever say that out loud in a Bible study. Plenty of us live as if it were the first commandment. Israel had a song for this, and it is short enough to memorize tonight. Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Rising early, staying up late, the bread of anxious toil, 3,000 years old, and it reads like a description of your Tuesday. And notice, the psalm never says the builder should quit building or the watchman should abandon the wall. The work stands. What the psalm calls vain is the anxious surplus, the extra hours squeezed out by fear, the toil that exists because somebody quietly believes the house survives on human effort alone. And then that last line, which generations have treasured, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Scholars debate the exact translation of that phrase. And we will not build a doctrine on one rendering. What no translation can remove is the picture. The beloved of God are allowed to close their eyes. The city stands at dawn anyway, because its true watchman was never the one snoring on the wall. So here is the sentence this chapter exists to give you, and it is short enough to carry out of this video. Faithfulness requires work. Omnipotence does not. You were assigned the first job. The second one was never posted. And every hour of anxious toil is an unpaid audition for it. But be honest, one layer deeper. Because under the fear of what happens to the world, if you stop, there is a quieter fear. And it is about what happens to you. Strip away the producing, the providing, the being needed, and what is left standing there in the quiet. Who are you? When your hands are empty, there is an answer to that question. Jesus gave it on an open hillside, to a crowd of the most tired people in Israel. In 3 sentences, that may be the most beautiful he ever spoke. He gave it to the weary, which means he gave it to you. Before you can feel the weight of what Jesus said, you have to see the people he said it to. Because these words were not spoken into the air. They were spoken to faces, Galilean peasants, most of them, people who worked the land and the lake with their bodies and paid for the privilege 3 times over. Tribute to Rome, taxes to Herod, tithes to the temple. Life for them was carrying from first light to last, and no amount of it ever quite added up to enough. That was the visible burden. The heavier one was invisible, because many of them had also been taught to carry their faith like one more load. Jesus himself named what some of their religious leaders were doing, and his words are on record. Sharp as a blade, they tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders, and they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. That was his charge against teachers who had turned devotion into a weight they would not help anyone lift. Imagine the unfinished list from chapter 1. And now, imagine that every unchecked item is not just a task, but a failure before God. Your rest is not merely lazy now. It is unrighteous. The list has become a ladder, and the ladder reaches toward heaven. And it grows a new rung every time you climb one. For people taught to live that way. Religion itself, the thing meant to carry them, had become the heaviest thing they carried. To those faces, sun-cracked, load-bearing, bone-tired in body and soul, Jesus lifted his voice and said this, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Every word is load-bearing. So walk through it slowly. Come to me. Every other teacher said, come to the system. Come to the rules. Come master what I have mastered. He points at himself. The destination is not a method. It is a person. All who labor and are heavy laden, that is the whole crowd. And it is the whole species. No entry exam. No minimum performance. The only qualification listed is exhaustion, which may make this the only invitation on earth you qualify for by being worn out. And I will give you rest. Give. Circle that word and keep it. Rest here is not wages. Nobody earns it. Nobody unlocks it at some level of devotion. It moves from his hand to yours as a gift, which is exactly what Eden already showed us on the first page. The Bible has not changed its mind in 4,000 years. Then he says the strange part, and the strange part is where the treasure is. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. A yoke is a farm tool, a shaped wooden crossbar laid over the neck of an ox so it can pull a load. Every person listening had seen 100 of them. And here is the shock. The man offering rest is holding one out. He does not say, come to me and I will remove every burden. Retire you from effort. Cancel your responsibilities. He hands the tired crowd a yoke. There is still work in this invitation. There is still a load to pull. Still a life of real obedience and real labor on the far side of coming to him. Whatever kind of rest Jesus gives, it is not the kind that empties your hands. So the entire question becomes, what makes his yoke different? And a picture from his own world answers it. Picture a good carpenter of that day, fitting a yoke. Nobody grabbed one off a shelf, because a badly fitted yoke tortures the animal, gouging the neck, rubbing wounds into the shoulders, wasting half its strength against the wood. So the farmer brought his ox in, and the craftsman measured it, shaped the beam, smoothed it, worked it to that one animal's build, until the ox could lean into a full day's pull without a single point of grinding. The load still weighed what it weighed. The fit made it carryable. Hear the invitation again with that picture in the air. My yoke is easy. Easy here carries the sense of kind. Good to wear. A yoke that does not fight the one carrying it. He is not promising a lighter world. He is promising a burden that fits, shaped to your actual frame, your actual calling, your actual limits, by someone gentle enough to measure carefully. And now diagnose the exhaustion you walked in here with. Because for many believers, the crushing weight was never the God-given work itself. It is that we are pulling in yokes carved for somebody else. The yoke of every expectation ever laid on us. The yoke of proving, day after day, that we deserve our place at the table. The yoke of being needed everywhere because being needed feels like being worth something. Those yokes were shaped by fear and applause and comparison, and they fit no living creature. And we lean into them until our souls bleed at the contact points. And then we wonder why serving God feels like dying slowly. Learn from me, he says, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. Gentle. Of every credential he could have offered, the maker of the stars reaches for that one. The hands doing the measuring are gentle hands, and what they promise is precise. You will find rest for your souls. For your souls. There is the depth marker, And it is the door into everything that remains of this story. Because a nap restores a body, a vacation clears a calendar, neither one has ever reached a soul. And you know that better than anyone, because you have taken the vacation and come home with your engine still running. You have slept 8 hours and woken up tired in the one place mattresses cannot reach. The person on the couch at 10:47 has an open evening and an exhausted soul. And no schedule adjustment on earth will fix that. Because the tiredness is not in the schedule. It is in the name. It is in the question underneath all the striving. The one that has been driving every gatherer on every empty field since Egypt. Who am I? If I am not producing, Jesus has an answer for that too. It is the fourth truth, the one holding up the other three, and it is waiting one chapter away. Come down off the hillside now. Leave the crowd behind. This last stretch of the road is quiet, and it should be, because it leads to the room where you actually live. There is a kind of tired that sleep cannot touch. You have met it in every chapter of this story. It was on the couch at 10:47, refreshing an empty inbox. It was out on the Sabbath gravel with a basket, harvesting a field God had deliberately left bare. It was screaming over the wind at a sleeping Christ. Do you not care? Underneath every one of those scenes, the same engine was running. And the engine is a question. If I am not producing, am I still worth anything? As long as that question stays open, no day off can close it. You can silence the phone, clear the calendar, sit perfectly still in a quiet house, and the engine keeps turning, because it is not burning fuel from your schedule. It is burning fuel from your identity. Some people have not rested in 20 years, and it has nothing to do with their workload. They are earning something every day. That was never supposed to be for sale. Paul wrote 2 sentences to the church in Ephesus that shut that engine off at the source. Read them slowly, because the order of the words is the whole gospel. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. Not a result of works. You're standing with God, the deepest floor under your existence. The verdict that outlasts every job title and every report card was never generated by your output. It arrived as a gift. The same way the 7th day arrived for Adam. The same way manna arrived on the gravel. The same way bread arrived at Elijah's head while he slept. You did not produce your salvation. You woke up inside it. And then Paul writes the next sentence. And the next sentence is where the workers in the room can finally exhale. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. There it is. Work. Right there in the verse. Honored and expected and prepared in advance. The gospel does not retire you. There are good works with your name on them. Real labor. Real service. A real yoke. But look where the works sit in the sentence. They come after saved by grace, then created for good works. The love comes first, and the labor grows out of it. The way fruit grows out of a tree that is already alive. Reverse that order. Put the works first and the acceptance second. And you have not just made a small theological error. You have built the treadmill this entire video has been describing. The one where every task is a payment on a debt that never shrinks. Where rest feels like default. Where the list is a ladder, and the ladder has no top. So here is the fourth truth, the last of the four, the one underneath the other three. In Christ, your worth is not something constant productivity can earn, because it was never for sale. You do not work toward being loved. You work from it. Adam rested before he had done anything, because the love came built into the world. You are invited to rest before the list is finished, because the love came built into the cross. The verdict is already in. Everything you do now is gratitude, not tuition. And when that truth actually lands in a person, you can see it, because their ordinary life starts changing shape in small, unspectacular ways. Somewhere a woman sleeps 8 hours and does not open her eyes, composing an apology. A man sits through an entire dinner with his phone in another room, and the world he was holding up does not fall. And his daughter tells him something at that table she had been saving for weeks. Somebody says no to a fourth committee, kindly and without a paragraph of justification, and discovers the church survives the sentence. Somebody else closes the laptop at a decent hour with 3 items still open on the list, and walks away. And the items are still there in the morning. Patient, harmless, waiting for a rested mind that solves 2 of them before lunch. A family guards 1 day a week where the machine simply stops. Meals and a walk and maybe a nap. And their kids grow up assuming that stopping is normal, which may be the most valuable inheritance in this whole chapter. None of that is a program. Scripture never issues one identical rest schedule for every believer in every circumstance. And Christians of good faith have differed for centuries on exactly how the Sabbath command applies on this side of the cross. Saturday, Sunday, a rhythm of the heart. This video is not going to settle a debate the church has carried for 2,000 years. But underneath every difference, the whole book speaks with one voice on the thing that matters here. You were not built for uninterrupted production. Nothing in the Bible knows how to imagine a human being who was 4 truths. Then, and now, you have all of them. Rest was built into your design before you earned anything. Stepping away can be faithful even while needs remain. Stopping is trust made visible. And your worth was settled by grace before your hands produced a single thing, which leaves only one scene left in this story. It is a quiet house, late at night, because all 4 of these truths were always heading to the same address. The laptop closes at 10:47 at night. Same soft click. Same little fan spinning down into silence. Same one light over the stove. Same sleeping house. Same finished dishwasher nobody heard. It is another night, weeks after the one where this story began. And to any camera in the room, nothing whatsoever has changed. The list certainly has not. 2 emails sit unanswered, and answering them tonight would still look impressive. The faucet in the hall bathroom is still dripping. March is a long time ago now. The retirement account is still waiting for that hard look. The call to mom slid off Thursday again. The volunteer form is still on the counter, still blank. Nothing got easier. Nobody lowered the bar. The world did not shrink its demands out of respect for 4 biblical truths. The person sits down on the couch, and the hand starts moving toward the phone. Watch it go, because this is the oldest reflex in the house. The arm knows the distance to the armrest without looking. The thumb already knows the passcode. The pull of the inbox. The little spin of the refresh. 4,000 nights of training are loaded into that one small motion. And behind the motion, on schedule, the courtroom door swings open and the prosecutor stands up with the list in his hand. And the hand stops. Not because of willpower. Something else got there first. 4 pictures, surfacing one after another in the dark. To the way things you truly know rise on their own when you finally give them room. A garden at sundown, where a brand new man with empty hands and no accomplishments watches his first full day arrive. And it is a day of rest. And nobody asks him what he has done to deserve it. A desert floor at dawn, bread baking on hot stones beside a prophet who wanted to die, and heaven kneeling in the sand to cook for him before it says one single word. An empty gravel field on a Sabbath morning, and the handful of bent figures combing it for what was already home in the jar. And how precisely familiar their posture looks from this couch. And a boat, gone still, on a lake of glass. Water dripping off the rigging, and a cushion in the stern with the shape of a head still pressed into it. The head of a man who slept through the accusation. Do you not care? Because he knew who held the storm. The phone stays on the armrest, and the person stands up, but not to work. They walk through the kitchen and turn off the light over the stove. They check the lock. The way you do. They stand for a second in the dark at the bottom of the stairs, in a house full of unfinished things. And here is what that second actually contains. So pay attention to it, because this is the whole video landing. No feeling of victory. That should be said honestly. No wave of peace. No swelling music. No glow. The 2 emails are still unanswered, and some part of the chest still registers them. The way a tongue finds a sore tooth. Resting before the list is done does not feel like triumph the first 100 times you do it. It feels like trust always feels at the start. Slightly wrong, slightly exposed. Like leaning your full weight onto something you cannot see in the dark. The manna-gatherers who stayed in their tents that first Sabbath morning probably lay there with their hearts pounding too, listening hard, half sure the sky had forgotten them. The feeling is not the measure. The staying is because the person climbs the stairs anyway, past the blank form on the counter, past the dripping faucet, which drips on, indifferent. A problem for Saturday. Up into the dark, where the people they love are breathing slow, trusting the night to a watchman none of them can see. The way children trust without knowing they are doing it. Tomorrow, the list will be there. That is not a threat anymore. That is just what lists are. There will always be manna left on the field at sundown. Always a crowd on some far shore. Always more that could be done by someone willing to burn themselves down to do it. The work of a human life does not finish. It just changes hands each night, passed from yours to the ones that never close. So here is where 4 truths and 16 chapters and 1 long night finally land. In a sentence small enough to take up the stairs with you. Some things are still unfinished. And tonight, you can still rest. The storm outside is his. The cushion is yours.